As long as the world exists, humans are prone to succumb to moral weaknesses such as laziness, pride, gluttony, lust, and greed. Every individual carries these urges within themselves, and at some point, we all give in to them. This is why countless thinkers throughout human history have spoken on these subjects. Addictions awaken the most irrational side of us. They tempt us, cloud our understanding, and direct our appetites to the lowest levels of human nature. They even make us bow to reason. They convince us that addiction is either a good thing or, at the very least, not as bad as it is said to be. Stoicism is one of the most critical philosophies concerning addictions. For the Stoics, addictions nullify a person's mind and freedom, transforming the addicted person into something resembling an animal that has surrendered to instincts and desires. Remember that Stoic philosophy is nothing but the tireless cultivation of virtue, and virtue is nothing but a rational habit that keeps us away from evil and allows us to lead a fulfilling and happy life. As you may have experienced, our moral weaknesses make us extremely unhappy. They seem to satisfy us completely, but this satisfaction is momentary and fleeting. When it disappears, all that remains is pain, suffering, and misery. Addiction appears to complete and fulfill us, but all it truly does is hollow us out, leaving wounds in our soul that only virtue can heal. Aurelius said, "Evil is its own punishment and finds itself in its own destruction." Seneca added, "Evil is the greatest enemy a person can face, but virtue is the best defense against it." I don't want you to misunderstand me because our channel is reaching more people, and I've noticed that many viewers have misinterpreted what has been said, so I want to make a clarification. As we emphasized earlier, the term evil represents the negative consequences caused by addiction, not the addicted individual. In this video, I will try to help you take responsibility for yourself, control your bad habits, and ultimately become more virtuous and happy. I have divided the video into two parts. First, I will explain what addiction is in Stoicism, and then I will give 10 tips on how to fight addiction through virtue. What is addiction according to Stoicism? According to Stoicism, addiction is morally wrong and a behavior that harms the person engaging in it. It is a mental illness that leads to irrational appetite, distorts judgment, causes pain, and disrupts all inner peace and tranquility. As we all know, examples of addiction include pride, anger, fear, lust, greed, gluttony, and others. There is one more thing I want to add that may surprise you. Indulged grief and the desire to inflict suffering on ourselves are also among the addictions. Stoics explain the moral flaws behind addiction very well, and they say this: the first and greatest moral flaw is ignorance. The second is a lack of self-control. First, evil is the result of a judgment error caused by the poor application of the virtue of wisdom. When we fall victim to evil, our understanding adopts one of two alternatives. Either we define something truly bad as good, or we accept that it is bad and try to convince ourselves that it is good. In both cases, the result is the same. Understanding becomes blurred, and the mistake is expressed through confusion and faulty reasoning. If desire is unleashed and momentary pleasure is privileged at the expense of true happiness, the person becomes a slave to their impulses. By nature, impulses are irrational and selfish. They make us more animal than human. A person who surrenders to this moral weakness abandons the reason that makes us human and becomes a prisoner of their passions. What is characteristic of animals is a lack of love for oneself and humanity, which is demonstrated by someone who surrenders to addiction. Such a person chooses to betray the most perfect and noble part of their nature. Addiction not only makes us more animal-like, but also turns us into dependent and manipulated beings enslaved by our passions. It nullifies our freedom and renders us incapable of choosing between one action or another. As prisoners of moral weaknesses, others can manipulate us as they please. By exploiting this deviation, this weakness, they can easily manipulate us. The mind becomes confused and surrenders to pleasure. We lose the ability to govern our passions and align them with virtue. According to Stoic thought, desire and virtue are incompatible. Therefore, prioritizing desires and eliminating bad habits distances us from both peace and the happy life to which every person should aspire. However, falling into addiction does not mean we are stuck in an inescapable situation. On the contrary, as Seneca said, the best medicine for people is virtue. Therefore, as Stoicism advocates, we must struggle every day to practice virtue. We must fight to become more rational and serene, gradually giving up bad habits and gaining self-control. This is a difficult task, but something as great as true happiness requires an equally great purpose. If reaching full happiness were easy, it wouldn't be as wonderful or valuable. If you think like the Stoics, you are likely to agree with all these ideas. However, you may be asking yourself, despite agreeing with this, what specific steps can I take in my daily life to overcome addictions? Where should I start? The rest of this video is dedicated to this topic, and here I will give you some advice on how to fight the tyranny of bad habits and cultivate virtue. But before we continue with this incredible information, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any information. After all, this could change your life. 1. Know yourself. To fight something, you first need to know what you're fighting against. Sit down and think carefully. What are your weaknesses and bad habits? Deep down, we are all aware of what they are. Our hearts, altered by them, point us toward the reasons for our restlessness and unhappiness: greed, lust, gluttony, and selfishness. Becoming aware of these feelings and being clear about what you want to fight against is extremely important. 2. Realize that it's a long and difficult process. Ending addictions is a very complicated matter because they are deeply rooted in our hearts. Remember that just as addictions did not develop overnight, they will not disappear overnight either. Along the way, there is a high probability that these bad habits will relapse, and there is nothing wrong with that. This is completely natural. The important thing is not to give up and always return to the fight to leave them behind. If you keep trying, the day will inevitably come when you fully overcome them. 3. Identify your motivation. Think about the valuable reasons that drive you to want to quit your addiction. The most important reason is to be happier. However, for each person, there may be other special reasons like achieving financial freedom, taking care of your health, or building better relationships. Keep these in mind, especially during the toughest moments, and always remember that they are far more valuable than the addictions that you are trying to overcome. 4. Set realistic goals. Set a goal that is challenging but achievable, something that isn't too easy but also not impossible. Overcoming addiction will require effort, but it is equally important to believe that you can succeed. 5. Start gradually. If you are deeply entangled with addiction, start gradually. You don't need to quit everything at once. Set incremental goals every day, every week, or every month. Be like ants, moving bit by bit until you build a mountain. As Marcus Aurelius said, virtue is not something gained overnight. It is the result of continuous work to control one's addictions. 6. Avoid risky situations. If you know what your addictions and weaknesses are, and if you are clearly committed to overcoming them, then it's essential to avoid situations that could lead you back into bad habits. This might mean changing your life's routines or even changing your environment to avoid temptation. Be brave and always keep in mind that every sacrifice will be worth it. 7. Stay away from people who encourage addiction. Encouraging addiction is not caring for your well-being. When you truly care about someone, you want everything to be good for them. Addiction is harmful and leads to unhappiness. Therefore, someone who encourages addiction does not have your best interests at heart. This might be difficult, but you need to distance yourself from people who only lead you toward bad habits. Otherwise, you will harm both yourself and them. Distancing yourself from such relationships is essential for the well-being of both parties. Don't hesitate to end these relationships when necessary. 8. Ask for help. No one can solve all problems alone. Reaching out to others can be incredibly helpful. Besides finding support, there are many people who have struggled with the same addictions. They can share their experiences, and you can learn a lot from them. Philosophers, friends, family, and professionals, there are many people who can offer great help. 9. Internalize the difference between instant gratification and full satisfaction. When you start overcoming bad habits, you'll realize the huge difference between the instant pleasure that bad habits offer and the full satisfaction that comes from overcoming them through virtue. The full satisfaction of overcoming bad habits through virtue brings infinitely more joy and peace of mind. Despite the challenges of overcoming bad habits, you will find that the contentment is lasting and fulfilling. 10. Think about the harm you cause to yourself and others. As Seneca said, controlling addictions is not just a personal development act, but also a service to society and the world. When we fall into addiction, we tend to think the harm isn't that great, or that the harm doesn't really exist. But this is a path that leads our soul toward misfortune. By doing harm to ourselves and denying goodness, we show a profound lack of love for ourselves. Moreover, addiction inevitably affects those around us, either because we share it with them, encourage them in it, or allow it in others. Addiction is like a spiral, eventually pulling everything and everyone into a black hole of harm. Don't harm yourself, and don't let others suffer from it either. Always seek goodness and virtue. Conclusion. Now I'd like to share with you some Stoic insights on moral weaknesses. Moral weaknesses are flaws we must overcome to achieve greatness and wisdom. Marcus Aurelius said, "Bad habits are chains that bind us and prevent us from reaching freedom and inner peace." True greatness is not in avoiding addiction, but in overcoming it. Seneca said, "Now tell us what you think about learning how to control addictions from a historical perspective." If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out our full playlist on Stoicism. I'll leave it here in the end screens. Also, don't forget to share this video with a friend who might need it and help spread this knowledge. Thank you for watching.